Hey folks, Michael with the CCERP podcast. Hope you are doing well and loving your local area. Get out, get outdoors. Today, we're talking about to Steve Baird about our local history. Learn about that, our area, some historical places we can go to see what things were like, see how things develop through the years and decades and centuries, see what things were like through the history. Could you introduce yourself, Steve?
Absolutely. My name is Steve Baird. I am the director of the Klein Historical Foundation up here in Klein, Texas, part of the Klein Independent School District. Before coming into this role, I've been here, I guess this is going on year 8. Background before that is I was an archaeologist throughout the state for years. I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Texas Tech University, and I have a master's in archaeology and heritage management from the University of Leicester in England. Did archaeology for a while, got kind of tired of traveling as much as I was, with family and kids. So went back and got my teaching certification and went in and started teaching 4th grade at Middlestead Elementary right here in Klein, Texas. The great thing about teaching 4th grade is it's the grade that comes to the facility that I run now on their yearly field trip.
Cool.
So I did that for about 8 years and then got lucky enough to start working out here some for Saturdays for the former director at the museum. And when she was ready to retire, went through the whole interview process, but I was lucky enough to have had some background in this. And so now I'm the curator, preservation manager, livestock care person, director. I wear a lot of different hats because I am the sole employee of the Klein Historical Foundation. So that is kind of a little bit about me. And now I always say I'm one of those few people that has 3 degrees and use all 3 of my degrees in one job.
Cool. Nice.
Whether, teaching 4th grade, doing some archaeology, doing some heritage management. So I get to kind of put all of my eggs in one basket, so to speak, at this job.
Sweet. What got you over to London to study? How did that?
In all honesty, I did that one through a distance learning correspondence course. I was doing some archaeology work at the time and wanted to pursue further higher academics, I guess. And the University of Leicester had a distance learning program, one of the few that I found for archaeology. And so they would every 6 weeks send you 2 or 3 big 3-ring binders with assignments, and you had to read all the material and do the work, and then you would call your professor in the UK and chit chat sometimes, and then you had 6 months to do your full dissertation on a project that
Cool.
they approved. So it was still rigorous, and it was the one way to now you hear distance learning courses all the time, but back when I did this back in I think '01 thereabouts, there wasn't a whole lot of ways to do archaeology at that time without going to a brick and mortar type school, and so Leicester was the one that offered it.
Yeah, it's a good thing about modern technology, that options available for people.
Absolutely.
It's critical in certain situations. Yeah. Did you do archaeology mainly in Texas or go other places too?
I went a few other states. Most of it was Texas, everything from the Gulf Coast to the Panhandle to Central Texas. I always joke that if there was a small town in Texas with a barbecue place and at least one hotel, I have probably stayed there. Everything from Paris to London to Edinburgh to New Boston to San Saba to Pampa up in the Panhandle and Amarillo. So I've
cool.
done a lot of different types of jobs to it, and that was kind of the big push. I've always been a history buff, so kind of landing into this role where I can put them all together was really beneficial. But yeah, mainly it was in Texas.
And what kind of things would you do? What were some of the projects?
Most of it, we always joke Indiana Jones lied to us a lot when we saw that movie. It was nowhere near that exciting.
Yeah.
So most of it was survey stuff for highway expansion, bridge expansions, timber harvesting in East Texas. One of the coolest ones we did was we worked in the Panhandle and identified what was called the Red River War battle sites. And that was the last U.S. Army and Indian conflict there was before the Indians were pushed over to reservations, being the Comanche and the Kiowa, Apache in there, and that allowed the cattle ranchers like Charles Goodnight and so forth to kind of come into the Panhandle and start setting up operations.
What?
So there was a lot of local history about where those sites were. So our job with the Historical Commission at the time was to pinpoint and really map in those battle sites to get a true history of where those sites occurred.
What year was that battle or those battles?
The battle was 1874, 1875.
Okay.
So it lasted all of, I want to say, just under a year, 11 months or so. It was a lot of quick skirmishes. The Comanche, that's where you have Quanah Parker. He was the last great Comanche chief, and he's really who was pushing it. And you had, Colonel Miles and Colonel McKenzie, who people hear about in the U.S. Army side of things. They were the big push out that way. So, and again, there was local history to it. So it was a neat battle to identify them and really kind of see the artifacts to it. It was the very first time that with archaeology that we used metal detectors to identify the artifacts.
Wow.
Because there's not a lot of soil deposition up in the Panhandle, so a lot of it was still pretty close to the surface by 3 inches to 8 inches. And so you'd identify it, kind of pull that cartridge shell or bullet up on the ground, you'd put a flag with it, label it, and stick it in and leave the artifact there. So when we mapped it in with the total station, we got elevations, we got distribution. We were honestly able to see from a report one particular soldier running across zigzag as the Indians were shooting bullets at him. And if you follow the dots on the map, you can kind of see where he was running before he got there.
Fascinating.
So, and that's always been our big put, make history come alive. And that's really what that job was. And so that was, I think, the last major archaeology project I worked on before switching roles. I did a couple smaller projects, but that was the last major one.
Yeah, I'm into studying biology and ecology and nature and doing animal tracking for study. And, just like we learn from some of the tribes in Africa that still track and that are great at it, they know the whole story and the feeling of the animal. And I not that I'm at that level, no way, but kind of going towards that or having that as a goal. I do that to the degree of which I'm capable, the low degree to which I'm capable, kind of the same thing with the soldier. So I really identify with that. What was this animal doing here? Where was it going? Yeah. All this stuff. So that's yeah.
Well, and the neat thing with that one is they actually took a lot of the stuff back to the Historical Commission before giving the artifacts back to landowners because they had the rights to it. But they were doing firing pin analysis so that you could actually see on the cartridge which rifle fired that cartridge, and you could see his movement across the battlefield.
Wow.
And it's the same stuff they used at Custer's Last Stand, and they were starting to do firing pin analysis there. And so they took that same approach to the Red River War project as well. Wow. So it made a bunch of old artifacts in the ground come alive and kind of give that person a little bit of history to who may have lived or died in that battle. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a neat to kind of put all of that together.
And I'm a little brain dead now because it's 2:20, haven't had breakfast, had a podcast before this, drinking coffee and stuff. But you said that's a Red River War?
Red River War, yes, sir.
Okay. So if I'm a little stupid in this podcast, I apologize. I don't make the rules, I just live here. Do the best I can.
Me too. I'm with you.
So, what's your favorite archaeological dig or job you did in Texas?
Oh, there were several. I mean, the Red River War was definitely one of the highlights to it. We worked on a couple of cemetery quick excavations down in Houston. When Allen Parkway was going in, there was some quick salvage stuff going on there. Worked on one down in Corpus where they were doing a road expansion and came across some native burials right underneath the Circle K kind of thing. Wow. So those are always kind of neat. It's to me, it's kind of the mundane that's interesting more than the big spectacular finds. It was really more about finding this campsite where they had a fire and they were, eating deer and bison or whatever, and then really trying to put that story back together as a detective, what was going on here, who was living here, how many people. That was always what intrigued me most with archaeology, more than the big spectacular finds.
Oh, it's like tracking.
Well, and I've always been more of a historical archaeologist because I like to really look at the record. What was written about this and then does it match up with what we're actually finding?
Hmm.
So that's kind of why the
Cool.
Red River War always sticks out, because what was written didn't really match
Huh.
what we found, whether it
Oh,
was local historians or even the Army records. It didn't match what we saw in the ground.
how is it different?
Um, Kate, one point there was a battle called Lyman's Wagon Train, and Lyman was coming back to resupply, one of the big forces, and had 6 or 7 wagons coming with him, and he got ambushed by what he called 400 to 500 Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And they had surrounded him, and he kind of shored up his wagons, and he was there pinned down for 4 days, and they couldn't get away until the Indians just left. Well, when we went out to all the ridges and we looked at it all, we found some bullet cartridges that would have been from the natives. But we found evidence of about 10 Indians actually shooting rifles at him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the only thing we were left to believe is that if there was a large show of force, we know that the Indians didn't have a whole lot of weapons with them because they were trading, but there were very few that had guns. So maybe you just had a 400 Indians sitting on the ridge, and it was a show of force more than anything else. But there was only, 10 or so Indians actually shooting back at his whole cluster of men on this little small hillside. So that didn't really match up, and we thought this would be a small little battle, and it went over like 2 or 4 square miles.
Huh. Wow.
It was quite large. So those were always the interesting pieces, and he probably fibbed his report a little bit so he didn't get in trouble, because they ate through every provision they had in those wagons that were supposed to go back over to his, commander. So it was neat to kind of look at the report and go, okay, that doesn't really match what we're seeing here. And then likewise, hey, here's saying we have all these rifle pits, and here we're finding all these rifle pits full of cartridges that they were shooting back at these 400 Indians sitting up there on the ridge somewhere.
Cool. Did it really last like 4 days, as he said, or could you tell if it was longer or shorter?
Couldn't really tell.
Yeah.
They were out of water, so they were drinking tomato juice out of leaded tin cans.
Wow.
And we
Nice.
found the pit where they were throwing all those in, and that's what the one guy was running that we talked about. He was running to the water hole that the Indians were guarding. So he finally had enough and just ran for it. So it's hard to tell, but it's funny. It's all these Indians all tied into almost every other battle. It's they were being chased at this battle, and then they kind of left, and they found this one guy and did a little battle skirmish, and as they left that one, they ran across this one. So all of them were really kind of connected to what we were looking at. So that was kind of fun.
Cool.
Just to kind of, again, it's fun. What guy doesn't like to dig holes, play in the dirt, get paid for it? So, and then you're kind of a detective at the same time to really figure out what was going on.
Yeah, picking up trash in the area. I like to clean up stuff because I want to feel like I want to actually be running through nature and having it clean, and not like feel like or actually kind of be walking through like a developing garbage dump. So I clean up the area. For that, for the animals, get up the glass so the dogs and animals don't cut their feet, so people who also enjoy nature can actually enjoy it, things like that. People who it matters to me, and I want to help out people who it matters to also. But out sometimes, like one time I found a tent, and that was fascinating. It would have been awesome if you were there, since you have more practice at this, to think about who was there and why and when. But
Yeah.
still haven't posted some pictures on these Facebook groups I'm on to have people say what they think happened and stuff. But it was like, I could tell that there was, because of the clothing, like some old clothing I found, I had to like rip out of the ground. It was like partially in the dirt, covered in leaves, There was a guy and a girl there. I remember it was like a toothbrush or something, and some toothbrushes and an old tent and all this other stuff. I like pulled out of the area so the county could haul it away. But yeah, that was like super cool, kind of, to find all that.
Absolutely.
And then I know I did a job when I was just a little punk kid out of college. Didn't really know how to work much or anything, and but had this one job, and we were in South Texas, going on people's land to do some like survey stuff, and we were in this one city on the Rio Grande, and it was down below. It was like right on the edge of a cliff, and we came across this old thing. I think maybe it was a fort, this old stone structure, and I wish we had cell phones back then as we do now, so I could have taken some pictures, but maybe it wouldn't have been allowed by the clause of the contract of being allowed to be on the property. But it looked like it was an old fort from the 15 or 1600s. I don't think something like that would have been a house. But given that it was made of stone and its location, I was thinking it was an old fort. But that was like totally fascinating, and I couldn't look at it because of the contract, you're not allowed to. So I wanted to look at it, but everyone's no, you can't do that. Get out of here. But yeah, that was
all
so
those rules
cool.
and regulations.
Yeah. But that's a bit about your background, and so can you tell us a little bit about the Klein Historical Foundation and the Wunderlich Farm?
Yeah. The Klein Historical Foundation started back in 1988, actually, and it was a way to try to gather information from the original settling families, from their ancestors or descendants, I should say, and kind of put it together as a way to preserve the culture, the history, the stories of those who first settled this area that we call Klein, Texas now.
Cool.
Dr. Collins had the idea. He was a long running superintendent at the time, and that was his brainchild. Was let's have a foundation
Cool.
whose purpose was really just to save and preserve the history. Then we, back in the mid '80s or so, Klein came to Mr. Wonderlic, who was living here on a portion of the land that his family had first settled, and asked to purchase the land in order to build an intermediate school. From my understanding, he said, sure, I'll sell the land to you with the understanding that I can live in this house, which is the house his dad had built in 1891, continue to raise chickens and farm some until the day I die. And the district said, oh, absolutely, sure.
Cool.
So they built what is now called Dory Intermediate School right next to this, and we have sitting on now is 8 acres preserved of the 120 acres that his dad had bought back in 1854. So his dad had built the house in 1891, and he was now living in the house and lived in it until 1994, at which point when he leaves and passes that year or the following year, Dr. Collins then said, okay, we now have this strip of land with this historical house on it and this barn and some tool sheds. What do we do with it? So that's when Dr. Severance got into play as the first historian. And it was, okay, let's create a curriculum that we can have fourth graders come out, since in fourth grade, that's when they first studied Texas history, and come out and really get a hands-on idea of what life would have been like in Klein, Texas when it was first settled. And so that was how Wunderlich Farm started. So we always joke, I always go back and forth, Wunderlich Farm, Klein, Texas Museum, because when I first took the job, it was some people were really antsy. Like, I don't want to give you our artifacts. You're at Wunderlich Farm and I'm a Kreinup, or I'm a Binfer. And really it's Wunderlich Farm because this is part of what used to be their original homestead. It is Wunderlich Farm and the Klein, Texas Museum. And that's the neat part about it. So that house has never been moved. It's never been relocated at any stage. It was where it stands, and it's where he lived in it. And since then, we've added in other houses. We've added in the 1882 Kreinup Hildebrandt house, and we showcase 1940 inside of that one. We have the Corville Schoolhouse, which was the last African-American schoolhouse used in the community up to 1966. Cool. We have the Maria Katharina house, which was the matriarch of the original Wunderlich family when they were coming in, built in 1874. We have the Tice homestead that was built in 1924. It's more modern one of the sites. So all of those are original houses that were moved to this property to extend the museum side of the complex.
Cool.
And so every house when we're here, and that's how it started, was let's get those fourth graders and let's get some hands-on. And I joke because back then I think there were maybe 10 or 12 elementary schools to come out here, so it was kind of easy. And now I deal with 32 elementary schools and about 4,200 fourth graders. So we are only one of 4 that I'm aware of living history museums or parks that are owned and operated by a school district
In the country?
in the country.
Huh, wow.
Now, for a long time, we thought we were the only one, and during COVID, I came across a couple more and started working a little bit closer with them on
cool.
how they're doing stuff and
Cool.
what they're
Good.
doing. And they're smaller than Klein is.
It's Texas, man. It's Texas.
Exactly. We do everything bigger here.
Except
So,
I heard a joke about someone, a Texan, going to Australia, and he's out with someone. He says, "Man, that thing, what is that?" And the guy says, "That's a grasshopper." Oh, I thought things were bigger in Texas. That's our grasshoppers, pointing to a kangaroo.
Size of a kangaroo.
Sorry if I told the joke so lame, but okay, you get the idea.
You're good. You're good.
So, sorry, go ahead. So you're saying you're one of the four, and
yeah, and so and really that's what it is. It got started as a place to get those fourth graders a hands-on, immersive experience where they could step into the life of what a pioneer was like in this area in rural Klein. It was to get their hands dirty. It was all of those ideas, and we've kind of ramped it up to steroids since I took over. We've added livestock to it, so we have horses and chickens and rabbits and goats and pigs. And as an educator, part of the thing that we always talk about is encompassing all your senses when you're doing something. Mm-hmm. And smell is by far one of the biggest triggers we talk about. You walk in someone's house, oh, it smells like grandma's house, and you smell that pie, and oh, that's Thanksgiving. And so when I took over as the curator out here, it was really, we need to get those animals in. We need to get that smell, because it's that idea that's going to trigger those kids 20 years down the road. And that's one thing we always hear about is that this field trip is what they still talk about. For the longest time, it was one of the only field trips in Klein. And in recent past, fifth grade has started doing stuff in third grade, and they've started doing more. And so that's why this was really looked at for the long time, because it was the only field trip that Klein did. So it went from really preserving the history in more of an oral tradition and getting interviews to now we have a repository where a lot of these families bring in, hey, grandma passed away, none of us know what to do with her stuff. Will you take it? And so we go through those items that help tell the story, everything from a cradle or bassinet from the 1850s up to a 1950s automobile.
Wow.
So we tried to really showcase what life was like in this area from about 1870 up to about 1950. So often people come here and they're thinking, okay, we're just going to show how they settled. And my goal is to say, no, they settled here. And those German families were very much, instead of just getting some land and moving on, that's where they put roots back down. And so they settled here. Their family still lives here. Kids still live on land next to their parents that they've always had since the 1840s and 50s. And so it's to show that not only did those families settle here, they lived here, and they're still living here. And that's where we get a lot of our pictures from and our artifacts from, and wagons and carriages and baby bottles and mundane items, tax receipts.
Cool.
I love showing people in the 40s era what your taxes were during World War II in Klein ISD. Because now they always talk, taxes are going up or taxes are going, and I'm like, here's what your taxes were in 1942 for the same school district that you're in now. So it's really that connection, and that's what we try to do, is find things that kids can connect to. We don't just want to throw facts at them. So when we're out here and my docents, my interpreters are here with us, everybody takes on a role. A lot of times I'm Wilhelm Wunderlich, and I'm cooking outside, or, we want to be that person so they can connect and have a name to call you. And we don't want to make it up, but we want them to connect. Hey, look, she's cooking outside, or he's ironing something, but why is that different than how we do it today? So we want to, everything we do also ties back into the teaks that those fourth graders do. So we do a lot of change of technology going on out there for science. We do about math. We talk about pulleys and gears and the windmill operating and the vacuum. So we really want to tie in everything they're doing in their classroom and do it out here as well, because now at that point they don't realize they're learning as so much, and that they come back and they talk about all the stuff they're doing, and at that point I have hopefully given the teacher a springboard that they can say, hey, remember when we talked about this last week? Well, let's look at that at the museum and see how it operated, so they can kind of get that same idea.
Yeah, makes it real.
Yeah.
And puts it in the context of human life and values more, helps you take it more seriously.
It does. Well, I mean, one of the funniest stories I love is in the Hildebrandt house back in 1903. There's a little boy, Heinrich George. He was 11 years old. He was slipping around sheets of paper. He was like ice skating, pretending he was ice skating. He got a big splinter in his foot, and he didn't tell his mom. But he got tetanus, and he got lockjaw, and he died.
Oh wow! Dang.
At 11 years old. And so we tell that story, and inevitably somebody will get a splinter from the picnic table, and she's running up. I got a splinter. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. So
that's funny.
It's great to know that they listened at that point, but then we can kind of talk about, well, hey, now you get a tetanus shot, and and kind of show back in that time in 1903, you didn't get a tetanus shot, and something as simple as a splinter in your foot could have killed you.
Yeah. And then connect that to the animals in the world. Think what happens when you break a glass out there. The dogs that you take for a walk that you love, the cats, animals, they don't have anything, so don't throw trash out there, pick it up, clean up the area a little more, be better.
And that's why we go back to water conservation all the time. Cool. Recycle, reduce, reuse, which ties back into their curriculum. One of the families, a rat had fallen into the well back in 1911. They all got typhoid from it.
Wow.
It killed 3 people. It killed the youngest baby who was born, and 2 days later died. Mom died from it, and the 18-year-old son died from it, Philip. And so we talk about, hey, the stuff that you're pouring down your sink, or your drain, your sewer, it's going to go into lakes, rivers, and streams. Guess what? Those fish get it. The deer drinks from it. They can poison that, and then it's a full circle. Yeah. I said, so you got to be careful what you're pouring down those. I said, just like here, with that well water, had we not been able to preserve it or replenish that well or let it recharge, the family couldn't have lived here. Water was the whole point to life. Without it, they couldn't live anymore. They would have had to move properties. So we do try to tie it back into stormwater pollution and runoff, and try to connect those things that they're going to see maybe on the news story, and still connect it back into that historical cycle.
Cool. Interesting. Others come out on field trips besides like 4th graders or any like high school kids for any reason, or what?
Every now and then we will have the time to do some more. A lot of it really depends on if we have the extra volunteers to do something. When I first started, it was a big push. We tried to get extra private schools in, homeschool day, things of that nature. And what happens is we either just don't have the volunteers to do it, because we're doing 2 to 3 tours a week for just 4th graders. And then we have to leave so many days left over for makeup days in case it rains. And like I've told other districts, I'm like, Klein is the bread and butter. I've got to make sure they get their days in first. And so then we try to work with other schools, and we'll see, do some other little things to it. The museum is always open the last Saturday of the month to the general public. Cool. So we try to push that as much. And with the pandemic hitting, being closed out here for the past 6 months, we tried to open up more once I got permission and approval to open the grounds. Then we tried to open up 2 or 3 Saturdays a month just to get it out there. Mm-hmm. We will go back to the last Saturday again starting in January. We don't usually do any big Saturdays in November and December because that's the holiday season. Yeah. But we try to do other events out here to get those extra crowds out. We usually do a big fall festival out here. We usually do a big Christmas festival out here, and that Christmas festival runs about 3,500 to 4,000 people in that one afternoon. Wow. Through here. And so that was the big that we canceled it this year because there's no way to keep with the guidelines and keep 3,500 people apart. Yeah. The way we needed to. So we're still doing a haunted house out here. We do ghost hunt and ghost tours at least twice a month on reservation only. We do a candlelight tour coming up in December to try to get those extra groups out here. We try to tie into our national charity leagues. We have a couple of those that we use for volunteers out here for cleanup days. We tie into the FFA groups as much as we can to try to get them out here. Cool. This season, because of the way it is, we made all of our 4th grade field trip virtual. So we pre-recorded everything. We'll do a couple of live streaming events for them because half the kids are there and half are at home, and teachers are stressed, and so we try to do that. So what we're going to do as an offset is we will probably do a couple of days each month where it's like we'll do groups of 10 at a time every 2 hours or something like that, and still try to get that education side in, and maybe we'll focus more on those homeschool groups because I know there aren't many private schools doing tours right now either. Yeah. Or field trips, I should say. And so it's right now we're kind of in a quandary of how do we get those field trips out there. But no, on a normal situation, we try to accommodate some extra schools. We usually get 1 or 2 extra days in there to bring in some extra kids. It's just hard with having 4,200 fourth graders through Klein. That takes up most of our weekday moments.
Cool. So if people are listening, they can donate to the foundation or volunteer, so there's more people, so more people can enjoy it.
Absolutely. They're on the website at kleinhistorical.org. There is a volunteer link. They fill out some form, send it back to me. That way, at least we have some people to contact. And some people like
Mattress Mac. Mattress Mac. Hey, Mattress Mac, could you donate, please?
That, or we can put Mattress Mac in some overalls, and he can work out in the house.
Sweet. Sweet.
And that's what it is. We have all types of volunteers. The ones we need the most are the ones that dress up and learn a story to it. We have others that just want to come out and pull weeds and clean places, and that's great. We need that too.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I'm the only employee, which means that when I leave today at 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm going to come back at 7:30 to feed the horses and put the chickens up again. So I come back twice a day, every day, Saturdays, Sundays, Christmas breaks, all of that. I come back at least twice a day to redo the animals.
Cool. Yeah, it'd be nice to help with that, especially if you got sick or something.
Sick? Come on. Don't get sick.
Yeah, true.
Well, and that's our joke, is we don't know if I'm a museum professional or if I'm a farmer anymore. So yeah. I figured I just kind of play both hats now.
Nice. It's good. Being around animals is good. We need more of that.
It is. I mean, my kids love it, and my older two that are in college were raised out here and helping me and volunteering on Saturdays and learning the parts, shearing sheep with me, things of that nature. And then my youngest 2 girls right now come out every weekend with me, and they think they own the museum. But they're not scared of the goats or the pigs or the chickens, and it's part of life. So it's nice to be able to provide that setting for them, even in a suburbia context as we are.
Yeah. And so the general public, if someone out there listening wants to go, it'd be only could they do reservation, or is it only that last Saturday?
Right now, it's that last Saturday. This month, what we did in October is we pretty much said the grounds are open every day from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The houses aren't necessarily open, but I'm just doing museum work and doing displays and preservation work, my museum side of it, each day. So they're able to come out and do a picnic if they want to. They can come feed the horses, feed the goats. We have some vending machines out with Cheerios for the goats and the horses and chickens. But that way they can still get out of the house. We say that with cooler weather coming in, it's a great time. We're going to do some more days in November. I just know I'm going to be gone for a conference for a short time, so I didn't want to publish those dates yet. And again, if you have a group that wants to come out, the best thing to do is to email me. If you go to the website and hit the contact link, it'll shoot me an email, or you can do it through our social media platforms. And usually we try to show all the upcoming events, both on the website and on the Facebook and Instagram sites, so that people can get an idea of what's coming up, whether it's pictures with Santa, candlelight tours, what Saturdays we're going to be open, that kind of stuff. So we're trying to include as much as we can without me losing my mind and my wife getting mad because I'm up here every single Saturday doing something. Because even a 4-hour Saturday is at least a 7-hour Saturday for me, because from opening everything to closing it back down,
the animals,
and so we try to find balance, between that. So there's some Saturdays or Sundays where I'll just say, hey, look, the grounds are open till 6 today. If you want to come out, bring a picnic lunch, see the animals. One thing that we've done because of the pandemic to help out is there's an app called Pocket Sites that they can download from any iOS or Android device, and we are the only one in Texas that I know of that's using it. So if you download it, the first thing that pulls up is a driving tour that we put in of Klein. Cool. Has audio and video, and then there's a self-guided tour of this property, of every house, every animal. Wow, so they pull up videos of the house inside of it. So while the house may be closed when you're here, that app, Pocket Sites, will allow you to kind of see inside and give a short video tour of it and a history of the whole place. Okay. So we tried to make it as easy as we could, since it's kind of a weird life that we're in right now. So try to make it at least that if people were out here, if they didn't want to read the signs, they could at least have an audio tour to guide them through the place.
And so during the COVID, you're 10 to 2 every day, and then there's the Saturday also?
Right now, we said for October, it's 10 to 2 Monday through Friday.
Okay.
For the month of October, and then we'll put another schedule out for November.
We need to get more information.
Of what we'll do. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You know, and because I'm looking at the calendar right now, we opened up 2 Saturdays in October already, and so I don't know if we'll do the last Saturday in October.
Hmm.
We're going to go back to the last Saturday strategically in January, which is when our farmers markets will start back up as well. So we usually pull in about 23 different farm vendors that set up shop out here that tie into kind of the history, like quilting and woodwork and farms and salsa and all that stuff. So we always joke that we're the only farmers market on an actual farm.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the joke. I said, where else can you go and sit under 8 acres of shade trees and sycamores and do a farmer's market and then go feed livestock?
Sure, yeah. I go to the Tomballs Farmers Market a lot, but I've been to the Farmers Market at Wonderlic a few times.
Yep,
Yeah.
good.
Cool. But, and so, let me see. Yeah, like you're thinking in November, it's also going to be 10 to 2, Monday to Friday, open to the general public. But then come January, general public is only on the last Saturday. Is that right?
Well, the last Saturday is really when the houses get open, and then we have costumed interpreters through all the buildings, things like that. The 10 to 2 side of it is just pretty much the grounds are open, come out and see the animals, that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's open to the general public all the time.
Yeah. And like I said, right now the best thing to do is just email us, and we can always give you a schedule of what's coming up.
Cool.
Because, you know, with being the only person, sometimes it changes at the spur of the moment as well. Like, oh no, we had a doctor's appointment, we got to go. Or, hey, look, a kid fell and broke their arm, we got to go to the doctor. So lock the gates, run. So you know, we don't want anybody to make the drive out here without knowing. And the easiest way to get us is via email. My main phone is in my other office, and so I go in there once a day, but I don't always get to see the main phone line.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So you got to do pretty much everything there with some help. You're like, you got to clean, take care of the animals, feed the animals, do some gardening, do the business stuff, set stuff up, do the accounting, all that.
Yep. I do it all. As a matter of fact, I just had a large collection of paper documents come in the other day from the Frank family, and so we're working on preservation of those. So my Mondays and my Fridays, a lot of times I dictate. That's sit in my office and work on documents that are coming in or artifacts that are coming in, because we still have to follow museum standards. While we call ourselves a farm, a lot of times we are actually a museum at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I've got to make sure that we follow the right procedures and climate control of the buildings and the way to store the documents and all of that. So that's the flip side of my hat. So we just had marriage certificates come in from Martin Frank when he first got married to Emily Tice in 1878, and then later on to Philippine Krimmel in 1882, I think it was. You know, and so. And that's really what tells the history. It's those marriage certificates, the baptism certificates, confirmation, Bibles coming in, their school books coming in with their, you know, signatures inside of it. So we talk about these people that are just memories, and here we have a signature from 1854. You know, and so that to me is really what makes that history come alive for a lot of the people that come out here.
So you're the only one that goes through all that stuff. You don't have anybody to help. Whenever some family turns something over, it's all you?
It's all me.
Wow. Jeez. Man.
Yeah. I drink a lot of coffee in the morning.
Yeah, me too. Thankfully, I've got, through my genetic testing on 23andMe, I know I've got the genetic variant so that I metabolize caffeine faster than other people.
There you go.
So that's my excuse to drink more.
That's right. I just don't sit down. If I sit down, I'm done. And so, you know, basically first, when I get in the first 2 hours, it's animal care. It's make sure all the animals are up and clean and things like that. And Mondays and Fridays, that's why it's hard to do field trips sometimes on those days, because I allocate those for sitting down at a desk and scanning documents and photographing it and getting all of that stuff done. The point to a museum is so that this stuff will last a lifetime. So a lot of it is coming to us from sheds and not the cleanest of environments. And so it's to get those things clean, put back together, you know, displayed, that kind of stuff.
Cool.
And then at the same time, make new displays. So I'm putting one together. Matter of fact, in the house, where you're talking to me right now, I'm in the Martin or the John Tice house. And in the parents' bedroom, I'm putting together a 1920 wedding dress display. So to kind of show what it would have looked like when she got married in 1915. So they can connect that picture on the wall to here's a dress over here. So we're putting some of these displays together, and the change of transportation, we're working on that one right now as well. So how the automobile went from horse and carriage to all these different cars to the Franks were the first automotive parts dealer in the area over on 1960 Jackrabbit Road. And so we have a Buick and a Ford spare tire, which is, heavier than a spare tire nowadays. This big old chunk of metal and wood. So we have those on display right now in the museum that we're working on, kind of how this transportation evolved, so people can kind of, you have your car enthusiasts. We really want to try to hone in on everybody's interest. Here comes a guy with an interest in cars. He may not want the history of agriculture, so here's a display that might speak to him. We did one last year that was cameras. We had cameras from 1920 to 1980. And kind of how those cameras changed. So we had a lot of photographers that were coming out to the museum that didn't know about us, and they were coming out here simply for that display.
Wow, cool. Yeah.
And so that's my goal, is to find something to hook each and every person to say we've got something for everybody out here. It's not just the animals. The animals help the kids come out, and the kids bring their parents, and those parents bring donations, and so that's what helps keep the museum up and running. Cool. As a 501c3, we're not funded out here by Klein School District. I'm a Klein employee, so my salary is paid for by Klein, but the operation and upkeep of the museum is strictly off grants, donations, charitable giving, festivals, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. And so folks know, Jackrabbit Road is what I still call 1960, but what do some people call it now?
Cypress Creek Parkway.
But isn't there some other name, like named after a congresswoman or something? At least part of it. But yeah,
I don't know.
Parkway,
I know they changed 1960 on a lot of it to Cypress Creek Parkway, and Jackrabbit Road really was only part of it. It was a dirt 2-track road.
Yeah, I think I'm old enough to remember that name being around.
I'm going to say I wasn't here at the time, but I see it in a lot of reports. Johnny Frank had the first automotive parts store right there.
Huh. Wow. And yeah, I remember 1960 before it had stoplights.
Wow.
I think so.
Yeah. Now you're just dating yourself.
Yeah, no comment. But, and then there's a place I go to for do my inspections all the time. Champions Car Center, something like that. I forgot their whole name. Pathetic, but it's used to be a Shell, but it's been there. I forget what they said on their sign since, like, I don't know, 1967, 1950s maybe.
Wow.
They are old business, but I've been going there for a while. But I think, yeah, because clearly they were there, given how long they've been around. But been there back when it was Jackrabbit Road. So probably just clearly, if it's Jackrabbit Road, down the street from Frank, and they probably knew each other.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't doubt it. I have, matter of fact, from Johnny Frank, we just had some stuff come in, and there was a 50s catalog called the Horseless Carriage Club.
Huh.
And it was still in the envelope, unopened, and so
Wow.
all the stuff came into me. So it's a vintage 1951 car catalog.
Wow, cool. You know the place I'm talking about? Champions Car Center?
Yep.
Something like that? Yeah. But probably not a lot of other businesses that are still around from that time. They're that old, but pretty cool. But anything else you want to say about the Wunderlich Farm or the Historical Foundation or anything?
No, that's pretty much what we do. We do a little bit of everything out here. It's
Cool.
like I said, it's the one spot you're going to find a farm and a museum in the middle of a subdivision.
Yeah.
So when people are trying to find the farmer's market, they always think they're lost. Or if I have a horse farrier coming out for the first time, they're like, "There's no horses out here. It's a subdivision."
Yeah.
And there was talk a while back of moving this someplace more visible.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of struck that down because what makes this unique is it's 8 acres of the original homestead.
Yeah.
It's not a piece of land that we're going to put some old buildings on. This was, 8 acres preserved of the 120 acres originally bought. So that's what makes it kind of unique. So going back to archaeology, that's what we've opened up some small units here and there to, uncover stuff under the ground that's hasn't been disturbed. We found some spoons from 1905.
Wow.
We were doing a trench for electricity, and so found some spoons roll out of the dirt right where they were used to make sausage. So, that's kind of what it's all about. It's about preserving that history, that culture, the oral traditions. And again, not just the Germans, because, going into what we'll talk about, the French came in here first, then the Scottish came in, and then the Germans. And so we really kind of celebrate. When we're open, I usually fly all 3 of those flags from the fence posts. I fly, Scottish, French, and German flags, because it's really all of their history in this area, not just the German side.
I'm the Spanish. Cabeza de Vaca. He was a slave in Texas for a long time.
6 years.
Was it 6? Yeah. 6, 10. Yeah, but cool. You probably know more than I would about it. You're the historian, but yeah. But what? Maybe walk like 3,000 miles barefoot. A slave the whole time to the Indians, passed around, treated poorly. But I wish he would have written more. It's good to have those firsthand accounts of what the Indians were like before Europeans came over, how many there were here and all that. But man, but he didn't know what would happen. If he knew, he probably could have written a lot more, and that would have been even more fascinating.
Agreed.
But but from what I've heard, looking into that, some people think he might have gone towards San Antone, and some stuff I looked at, people who've seemed to dug into it more think that the route he took was not so much maybe coming up here around Cypress Creek, but going more along the coast. And then I forget what they said, he passed into Mexico from modern Texas, but they say he went more south, and some people think he went up more around Austin, San Antonio, and something like that. But that's interesting.
Yeah, I bet he once he found a good waterway, followed that for a while and crossed the Rio Grande over.
Yeah, interesting. As long as the Indians let him.
That's right. He escaped. He was on the road for a while.
Huh? How long?
Oh, I don't remember how long it took him to get back down to Mexico City.
But how long was he escaped?
Well, he was with the Karankawan for 6 years before he escaped, and then I want to say it was another 6 to 8 years before he ever got back down to Mexico City.
Okay, yeah.
So he wandered around quite a while before he crossed over the Rio Grande even, and then started going south.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find it fascinating, because how did he know where to go? Because he was coming from Florida to here. Mm-hmm. He wasn't even really sure what was down in Mexico City area.
So for folks who might not know, could you tell this story briefly?
Yeah, well, Cabeza de Vaca, one of the first Spanish explorers coming through, his whole point was to come across and sail from, I think he built a raft or whatever, and he kind of came over from Florida.
Because they were shipwrecked, right?
Yeah, shipwrecked over there, and so then he did a makeshift raft with a couple of people and what we call the first slave, in the area. Esteban was a slave to Cabeza de Vaca, and it was really the first African American person that the Indians had ever seen at the time. Because this is like 1528 is when he crashed on the coast of Galveston. So he gets over and lands on the coast of Galveston and pretty much washes up on shore. It's him, Esteban, and there might have been another 1 or 2 soldiers with him, I'm not sure, captured by the Karankawans. And, they kind of passed him around for a while, but at the same time, he kind of knew things that they didn't know. So he was able to cure a lot of simple ailments that they had there within the tribe. So they really looked at him as this kind of miraculous shaman type figure. And same thing with Esteban. Here he had, an African American's hair. It was something different than they had ever seen in their life. Which, later on the Indians started calling African Americans buffalo soldiers, because the hair on their head looked like that of a buffalo.
I didn't know that.
And that's why they got the name, was based on the afro style hair. It was that spongy feeling, and they equated it to the bison. So he was with the Karankawa about 6 years before he escaped, and then he kind of wandered within the interior of Texas for a while before he crossed over the Rio Grande and eventually made it back down to Mexico City. At which point, I think he stayed there for a little bit and then took a ship back over to Spain.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. Pretty much naked and barefoot. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, I'm going to assume within 6 years he learned how to make moccasins, maybe from the Indians.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he picked up some tricks from the Karankawa. You know, Karankawas were known since they lived on the coast and there's so much mosquitoes down here. They would rub themselves with alligator grease to kind of protect themselves from mosquitoes. So I'm sure he picked up some tricks like that as well, and edible plants like the prickly pear and stuff like that to keep him sustained for that amount of time.
Cool. So, what about in your history studies and all that? What have you learned about the first Indians, Native Americans who were here?
The tribe that we have out in this area, again, still tying into the Karankawans, so to speak. It's a group, and I'm going to probably mispronounce its name pretty well. Archaeologist, and there's a bunch of different spellings to it. They were docile, as opposed to the Karankawans, who were very hostile for the most part. Karankawans were cannibalistic. They pretty much ate their enemies, so to speak.
Isn't that how they got their name?
I think so. But I mean, because I know from archaeology we find butcher marks on bones that were tied to the Karankawan burial sites.
Wow.
But this other tribe, they're all part of the Atakapan language group right within this area. Just looking at this, a quick note I have, it says it was a group that included the Badai Indians north of Spring Creek, several other tribes along the coast. So you had several tribes in here which were all part of the Atakapan language group, including the Caddoan. So you had Caddo Indians, far east Texas, that were very agricultural and sedentary. They built the big beehive style settings, which was a lot of work, so they didn't really ever move. And then
People
you have these other ones.
Still go visit that, like in Texas, the Caddo
Yeah, there's
place. If it's open yet,
Texas,
it got damaged in some storms.
about
I don't know
2
if it's
years
open.
ago.
Yeah, so I guess it's open by now, but I have to look again.
I think so. And you had the same thing. Cattle were up in Missouri. They were up in Illinois. They were up in Louisiana. They had a big trade network to them. But the Orcoquisa, like I said, lots of different spellings to it. I think it's how you pronounce it. We're kind of pretty much in this area off of Spring Creek, Trinity River. The Badais were around Spring Creek. Peaceful, not really sedentary, not really agricultural, but they were still hunting, bison and deer and bear, and fishing would be a primary thing off the creek beds and even in the Gulf. So that would be your basic Indian tribes that were in this ballpark area.
And so people know, like the bison used to actually come down to this area before they were massacred and wiped out. Widespread herds would go. I think I used to associate them with being more in the Midwest, but this is like at the southern part of the range. I think they'd actually come some of them all the way to the Gulf Coast, if I remember right.
Yes.
But, and so, and I'll put some stuff in the show notes if people are interested. Look at maps of where some of the different tribes were. If I can dig those out of my email or whatever, or just have to look it up on the internet again. But
I have a map right here. It says Indians of Southeast Texas, and you got Karankawans down near Matagorda Bay, which is where Cabeza de Vaca would have shipwrecked in. You the Badais, which is just north of Spring Creek. The Orcaquisas were just east of Spring Creek. The Caddos are up near Sabine River, so right on the border of Louisiana and Texas. And all of those were pretty much part of the Atakapan tribes. Atakapan was just a language, so they all pretty much had the same language, just different tribal names and cultures and customs.
Yeah, and what about around Cypress Creek and a little west of Spring and Cypress? Is that still part of the, as I'd say?
It would probably be
still
part of the, they're part of the Badais or the Orquisas. semi-nomadic, small tribe. This tribe roamed from lower San Jacinto and Trinity River valleys. So again, semi-permanent, but that means they were still pretty nomadic. So probably going amongst the other tribes as a trade network. So I think they all pretty much intermixed at that point.
And then what is it to the west? Would have been Comanche or Apache or what?
You get into Tonkawa out that way. If you go pure west, you go through Tonkawa before you start hitting Comanche, and then you start hitting Apache towards over El Paso.
Okay.
Apache had a larger area until the Comanche pushed them back out.
So around like Fredericksburg would be Comanche?
Keep going west, you'll probably hit Comanche. So Fredericksburg, you're still going to be Tonkawa for a while. Okay. And then it's not far beyond that. I can't think of where it is, but lost my train of thought. So Cynthia Ann Parker. So Parker Fort is out there just on the edge of the tree line, so to speak. And that's hitting Comanche land. So if you look up where like Fort Parker is, it's another living history museum area. Just at that point, that's kind of Comanche land, because that's who stole Cynthia Ann Parker, who eventually became the mother to Quanah Parker.
Okay. And then over to about El Paso would be Comanche, and then it starts Apache?
Apache starts kind of in that mountainous regions.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, it's so funny with the tribe. I mean, really we have the Spanish to thank for this, because I can't think of his name off the top, but as he was going into New Mexico, he was having the Indians tend the horses for the Spanish. So he was teaching them horse care and how to do all that, but he was also very, very cruel. And I want to say Nuna Alvarez, I think, but I have to double check on that one.
Sounds familiar.
But he was so cruel that a lot of them were escaping, and they started taking those horses up north. And then they were teaching other Indians how to ride horses and how to become it. And so they ended up exposing the Comanche to the horses. The Comanche were way up north Dakota, Wyoming area. Well, the Comanche gets so good with those horses that were all stolen from the Spanish, then they start sweeping down the plains, hitting to Texas, push the Apache out of the way, and then taking that whole swath from Texas all the way up north.
Wow.
So all because the Spanish were heartless and cruel to the Indians at the time is why you started getting these great horsemen of the plains. Had they not been that way, then it makes you wonder, would the Indians have been such the horsemen that we know them today?
Yeah. How long did it take them to become such great horsemen? Was it like 10 years, 50 years? Do you know?
I wouldn't say it was probably within 100.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty amazing. But, and so would it be out to, what, we got San Jacinto to our east, and what, the Brazos to our west? Was it Brazos, like the border between, like some of these tribes in the, the Tonkawa?
Yeah, well, the Brazos would have separated your Karankawas and your Orokokisa and your Badais.
Oh, the Tonkawa would have been out further?
And the Tonka would have been further west from there. And then you have another Pueblo-style tribe, Coatliclans, that are down more along the border of what we call, but you have more your kind of your desert region that you have down along the Rio Grande River, Del Rio, that area.
Cool. And what can you tell folks about the lifestyle and diet and culture of the Native Americans who were here at first? What have you learned about all that?
Well, and most of them, without being agricultural based, you had the Humano Indians that were out, in that mountain basin region, kind of El Paso, that area. They were an agricultural group. You had the Caddo that were kind of agricultural over in the east side, and so they're going to be growing a lot of maize and beans and what we call the Three Sisters out there. That's what they're going to be growing a lot of. They're going to be doing a lot of fishing off the creeks, trapping small animals, deer. They're not going to be your big bison hunters. To be your bison hunters, you were nomadic. So your nomadic tribes are the ones that are going after the bison and following them to the hunting grounds. If you watch like Dancing with Wolves, that's the whole point. You have your summer camp, your winter camp, because you're following those bison coming through. Karankawan were just the same. They were still nomadic. They weren't your big bison hunters. They were more of your fishermen, alligator, gar, bass, that kind of stuff through the bay and through the river channels. So a lot of them are just going to be opportunistic. So small game is going to be your bread and butter. We see a lot of stuff in the reports and the coprolites, things of like that nature. If you're doing archaeology stuff, you find a lot of bones in their excrement. Coprolite is basically fossilized poop from the humans. But you're finding seeds and bones and pebbles and rocks, and teeth are ground down from your Native Americans because you're using manos and matates to grind stuff down. You're using it to break open acorns and walnuts and things of that nature. Pecans. So San Saba region, Central Texas, has the largest native pecan grove anywhere in the world. And it's right here in Texas. And so that was another big point. You have the Galt site, which is just south of Georgetown. And so the Galt site, it's cool on the archaeology side, is it's the oldest continually habitable or lived in site in the U.S., which means that from first occupation to modern occupation, and for archaeology, we always said Clovis, we're the first people of America based on the Clovis, New Mexico site. And now we actually have documentation and evidence that there were people here before the Clovis people were.
Wow.
And all of that is found, at the Galt site.
How far back would that be?
Excuse me. Let's see. Clovis is 13.5, so I think we're looking at about 16,000 years.
Wow. Yeah. And so folks know, I've read that hominids were actually here a lot earlier than you think. They just weren't Homo sapiens. There were species in the genus, I don't remember how many hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, but Homo sapiens is, more in the last, 40,000?
Well, and we know we have sites down in Chile that are older than the sites here in Texas, meaning they had to cross this route before they got down to the southern tip of South America. Either that or they were taking boats. Excuse me 1 second.
Cool.
My apologies. So, we do know we have those sites down there.
How old are they? Do you know?
18.5.
Wow. Interesting. And what kind of stuff is there around Galt that people have found as evidence that humans were there? Fires, bones?
Mammoth kill sites, fire pits, bone, chert, projectile points, shell floors right above the water table. So they were actually shell.
Oh, okay.
Like mussel shell, that kind of stuff. You have that stuff just above the water table, showing that there was people doing some kind of sedentary, semi-permanent structures right there. When at that time they were just merely nomadic, following the food game around. Here you're seeing people that were actually setting up a site, so to speak, to live a little bit longer than normal.
Interesting. Cool.
So what's neat about Galt is it actually has 3 habitable zones all kind of converging together. So they didn't have to go anywhere. They had all the kind of flora and fauna, plant and animal life that they would ever want right in one particular spot.
Cool. Let me reconnect. Sorry.
You're good.
Had to check my calendar. I was all of a sudden, wait, what do I have to do after this? So I had to look at my calendar. And then I remembered, since I'm a private tutor, I work some later. Kids get out of school, work later. So I was processing my work schedule. So sorry.
You're good. You're good.
But, and so in this area around Spring Creek, Cypress Creek, were the Indians, would they starve a little more or go a little more hungry than, say, some tribes that would follow the bison? Or do you know how that would work?
I don't think so. I think they had a plenty of fish. I think their diet's going to be more small game, rabbit, squirrel, possum, fish, that kind of stuff more than your big game.
Because there's plenty around here as it is, and there'd be even more back then.
Right. And that's why people first settled this area. That's why you had, Harrisburg, aka Houston, spring up, because you have all the waterways converging down into Houston, so to speak, and then going into the bay. That even when the farmers, the immigrants first started coming over here, it was fertile land. It was a lot of wildlife, a lot of game. So, and the flip side of that is, I know from the German side, in order to cut wood in Germany, you had to be aristocracy. You had to be nobility to cut the lumber,
wow.
to build houses, things like that. And so one of the letters we have from Johann Peter Wunderlich back to his dad is, hey, there's enough wood here for everybody to cut, and anybody can cut it.
I cut my own word, nanner, until the king.
So, that's why they all started immigrating, is because the land was too expensive. They couldn't farm enough land to feed their family. There wasn't any wood to be cut, and they get here, and they got to think that the same thing about the natives is you had plenty of lumber for canoes or for building structures. You had lots of wildlife and game. So the same reason that we set cities in spots is the same reason the natives first lived there.
Yeah.
It was available resources, and then people continue living there until we get to the modern era, and we just put a city right smack dab where their tribes used to always be. And then we get shocked when we find Indian burial sites around the city.
Yeah.
But that's the same reason we're putting cities in spots, the same place that the natives would have initially built their small villages.
Yeah, kind of like modern highways are on top sometimes of wagon trails, which are on top and there because they were foot trails, which are there because they were animal trails.
Yep.
It's very, there's, a lot of work on that. You can read some books about pathways like that, how some of that stuff goes back millennia into ancient history. And then in our area, there's deer here already, but there would have been more bison coming down, rabbit. We got cottontail down here called swamp rabbit, which can swim, and they're bigger than others. I think we got 2 species of rabbit in this area, from what I've seen so far. And the swamp rabbit are bigger rabbit than some others. There's a marsh rabbit, like more in Florida, weighs like 2.5, 3 pounds, but our swamp rabbit is like 5.5 or 6.
Right.
So a lot more meat on it. And then there's the fish, but people might not know. We've also got a lot of river mussels native to the area, some clams, some of them. I've seen shells that are like, 4 or 5 inches long.
Well, yeah, I mean, and mussel shells were so plentiful out in this area from the rivers. That's what they were using to grade the roads initially.
Wow.
So, like Luetta Road out here, it was all graded with mussel shell.
That they got locally, not just from like the bay or something?
No, a lot of it came from this area.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Huh. Wow.
Yeah, so, I mean, and that's what, you talk about, it was dirt road, and they started putting your mussel shells on it and grading it that way before it started going to blacktop and gravel type stuff. I have pictures of the Bonin family, which was a French family in the area, on their graders being pulled by mules as they're grading out this mussel shell. And so I find it ironic out here, even by my pig pens up near the front part of the property, when we're digging around, mussel shells will start popping up.
Wow.
And that would have been probably from what was on what we call Tice Mail Route Road. It was called that because that's the way the mail came to deliver past the Wonderlic and to the Tice house. So it would have all been graded initially by mussel shell.
Huh, wow. Yeah, just like 1960 FM farm to market. Yeah.
Right.
But interesting, yeah. So then, there must have been a whole lot more mussels and clams out here before then. Because, like, raccoon eat them. I've seen them opened up. Kind of seems like freshly. I think raccoon go in the creeks and eat them too. But then alligator, maybe some beaver. So there would have been a lot the Indians could have eaten. Although when I've read, maybe it's in a different part of the state then, because I've read in some things about Cabeza de Vaca, sometimes he'd be starving. It seems like there'd be just the tribe in general. It didn't seem like it was him from what I recall. Correct me if I don't remember right or misread, but it seemed like some of the tribes would have periods where they weren't getting enough to eat, a little more famine, and they'd go to areas of Texas where there was more cactus, and that was a big event for them, eating the flowers, to have something to eat after a period of a little bit like less to eat, a little more starvation or something. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
what do you
I can see that. And again, if you start looking at all the tradition, we think of Indians, we think of bow and arrow, things of that nature, and the Indians weren't using the bow, until the Spanish brought it to them. They were using what was called an atlatl, which is basically a spear thrower. And so things like a spear thrower are going to be meant more for your deer, larger animal like that. I mean, I'm sure you can hit a rabbit with it, but it's going to be a little more hard.
Yeah.
So with your rabbits, your squirrels, things like that, you're probably looking at snares and setting deadfall traps. And we watch reality TV shows all the time, like Alone and stuff, where these people are skilled outdoorsmen setting up snares, whatever, and they'll go 3 or 4 days before they catch something.
Yeah, right.
So I can imagine that there were times of famine where they were eating, and I know I've read reports before where they were eating stones and rocks in order to put something in their belly.
Yeah.
I think a majority of your tribes, though, especially if you get out of away from the coast, we're doing pretty well most of the time.
It would make sense. Otherwise, they're not stupid. Otherwise, why would they stay there?
Yeah.
People think, well, they lived a long time ago. They're so stupid. We're better off. Well, not. Where do you think we got here? We didn't
we're just imitating what they're doing.
Yeah, we didn't get magically smart out of nowhere. It came from our ancestors.
Yeah.
So if they didn't survive, if they weren't good at it, we wouldn't be here.
That's right. Yep, I agree with that.
And then I've heard sometimes like maybe they had to eat some. As someone I know said, some like forest M&Ms, deer pellets.
I'm sure they ate a lot of things that we wouldn't even think about doing.
And then Cabeza de Vaca, I think he reports that some people sometimes they'd go through their own excrement and pick out the seeds and stuff like that and eat that.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that part.
Yeah. Gotta do what you gotta do.
You do, and you think about pine nuts, and acorns aren't really a suitable activity to eat because they have so much tannic acid inside of it. But if they mash it down and boil it, it tends to get that tannic out of it, and they can still make a paste and a bread out of it. Another thing we did before, we find a lot of large snail shells in archaeology records.
Cool.
And so we did a study, or we did an experimentation, I should say, where you got a lot of large ones and you put them on these hot rocks from around your fire. And basically it starts to smoke them and cook them out, and the little foot of the snail comes out, and you use a mesquite thorn to stab in there and you pull the snail out.
Huh.
And then you eat it. So, I mean, we wondered why we found millions of these snails in some of these sites.
Cool.
Well, because it takes probably about 100 or so before you say, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, true.
It didn't taste good. I mean, I was a college student, so we do whatever we had to for science at that point.
Yeah.
They didn't taste. It was pretty gritty and nasty, but it's a food source.
Yeah. How do you know? Did they use mesquite thorns, or are you just thinking they did, or like what?
We were just thinking it was mesquite was a viable option around us. And they had big thorns, and they were long enough and strong enough to stab in the foot of the snail coming out and pluck them out. So sometimes we tried boiling in water. We tried sticking on the coals of a fire, and different approaches, just trying to figure out why we found so many empty snail shells around these campsites.
Cool. And then, even if people were picking stuff out of their excrement, they could wash it off and stuff, and people can, like, you might think it's gross, but I mean, people pay, like, I think it's coffee. I think you feed some coffee beans to cats, and it comes out in their crap, and it has to do that to make something ripe or something or other. I forget. Right. And then they pay like $100 an ounce or something for this coffee that some animals crapped out. It's not like we don't do it. Or
we haven't come as far as we thought.
Yeah, there are people in France or something that I forget where it is in Europe. They there's something that they pay a lot of money for, a delicacy they think, but they eat something and then you have to drink like vodka with it because to kill it in your stomach. Otherwise, it'll burrow through your stomach and get into your brain and kill you. But why the hell would you eat something like that can kill you if you're not careful? What if, like, the vodka or whatever it is doesn't work, you know?
Yeah,
it's like,
I'm not going to step in that one.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's like, geez. But, and then eating seeds out of your own excrement is better than, I think, being accountable, you know, giving your options.
Yeah.
I'll go for the seed. Wash it off a little bit and stuff. Yeah. Because, yeah, they're human. You know, I doubt they really just picked it straight out of their feces and ate it, you know. They're not stupid.
You do what you have to do to survive, I guess.
Then you can get it and mix it with other stuff, acorns or whatever. Yeah. But I think that was in some of Cabeza de Vaca's own writings. Or at least reports about him, so it must have been in his writings so they'd know about it.
Probably.
But, let me see. Unfortunately, I gotta go soon for work, but you probably got stuff to do too. But, you got anything else? Any other interesting stories about the early Native Americans in this area?
None of the natives. I'm going to, by the time most of the families are moving here, most of the natives were extinct.
Yeah.
By that point, the French started coming in through New Orleans, and then coming this way, we had 13 original French families in this area: Boudreaux, Pivoteau, Bonin, Pilat. Were a couple of them.
Like Piot's Gully. There's a gully named after them.
Yeah, he had a big house down in Houston and a big house up here. He was a big lumber.
Huh.
And what people don't realize is there's a lot of different areas up here. Then you had your Scottish move in. We had the McDougals and the Mahaffeys come in. The Mahaffeys lived next to the Pilots over in the what we call Willow area.
Yeah, actually, I knew someone in high school named Mahaffey. I don't know if they're related, but yeah.
I'm sure. McDougals were another Scottish family. He got the first land grant from President Houston in the area when we became a republic. And then you have a mass immigration of Germans. By the time the Germans started coming in, you don't have a big Native American population out here anymore. Most of them have gone extinct or they've moved on.
Yeah.
At that point, and even we talk about, we said Red River War. That was really the last holdout of Indians up in the Panhandle. And that was a conglomerate of Apache, Comanche, Kiowa, and I can't think of the fourth tribe. But that was 1874. So by that point, they're the last holdouts. Everything else is open down here. And that's when you have, Houston coming into play. You have a big railroad system coming into play up this way. Everything coming from Houston up to Cypress to Humble to what we call Louetta to Tomball and starting that. And so that's going to be, slowly after the Civil War kicking in to it. So I think a lot of our immigrant families that came down to this area didn't have a big, once we hit the 1860s, we didn't have a big connection to the natives that were down here anymore.
Yeah, I think in Dan Severance's book, she talks about how some family, I think it was a German family, helped some local Indians in the area, and they'd always put some food out. But then it's really sad. Then they said one day the Indian just didn't show up anymore. That brought tears to my eyes. But
yeah, they move on at that point. Houston. There's a story. I mean, we think life was so much simpler back then, but we kind of see the same stuff. There's a story that is written in Severance's book. Adam Klein. He makes a big circumvent around the way. He went to the gold rush first, came back through South America, gets up here.
Wow.
And he had struck it rich in California. He meets his wife back here. He has her meet in Houston. And while he's here, it's the rainy season, so we can't really pass the roads. His goal was to go up towards Wichita Falls, that kind of area. Well, while he was here, his saddlebags full of gold, he got robbed and got it all stolen.
Oh, wow. Dang.
And so he had enough gold saved in a money belt that nobody knew about.
Wow. Lucky.
Yeah. So, he happened to have enough and met some of the Germans from the Big Cypress, the Klein area, and they said, you got to come check this area out. And he was offered land right there in prime real estate of what we call Houston now. And he came up here and bought the 600 acres at 33.3 cents an acre. But it's this whole big story. We had robberies back then. We had, convicts. There's a lot of cool stories. We talk about Kirkendall.
Yeah, if we could, do another podcast or two, maybe talk a little bit more about the Native Americans, but get into some history that happened after that. I'd like to do that if we could, if you're willing.
Always.
Cool. Get into that. Yeah. You probably got stuff to do. I got to get my rear end gear, get after some stuff. But
no worries. Like I said, we always have the history, and we're always willing to share it.
Sweet. It was a good discussion. And then if folks have any questions they have for you, they can shoot them to me.
Yep, shoot them to you. They can go to our website and shoot me a link that way, or go to social media. Either one, I'm always available that way.
Awesome. All right. Any last words for folks before we wrap up for today?
Nope. Like I said, just follow us on social media if you want to. Go to the website. You'll get a lot of dates that are coming up for different activities on the farm. Our big goal is just to preserve the history and to show people that history isn't boring. It's
true.
And we go beyond history daily. So even when we do our haunted house, guess what? There's a little history lesson before they step into it, because you never know what kind of ghost you're going to find, who died in the house.
That's funny. Yeah.
So
cool.
we always try to connect it in anything we do. We go back to the history because that's what we're here for. And it can't, it doesn't have to be boring. I used to hear kids in school all the time saying, "Oh, history's so boring." So we want to really get them dig deep into it and realize that everything is history. It doesn't have to be a boring day. It can be a lot to learn and some good stuff with it.
And the historical mindset, just like Darwin couldn't have done what he did without a historical mindset and historical methods of thinking.
Right.
Geology and everything. But yeah, it's important. So, well, thanks for the discussion and thanks for all you do, and looking forward to more.
Anytime. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.